That morning, the office felt cold as steel. Light from the glass window spilled across the keyboard, pale and uneven. I sat in my usual chair, the one I had occupied for years, managing shipments and coordinating night shifts. 3 days. I had only taken 3 days off to bury my father. 3 days, signed and approved by my supervisor himself, with the note, "Take this time with your family, Grace." When I turned on my computer, a new email blinked in my inbox. The subject line was short and precise, regarding termination of employment. I read it once, then again, hoping I had misread it. But the words stayed still, cold as the concrete walls of the meeting room. "Please clear your desk before the end of the day. HR will assist with exit procedures. Thank you for your contributions to Horizon Freight Solutions." I didn't move. My hand stayed on the mouse, watching the cursor blink on the screen. At the bottom of the email was a signature I knew too well: Richard Cole, Regional Director. The same man who had raised his glass to me not long ago when we sealed a major client deal. The same man who once said I was the backbone of the Western Operations Division. And now, with one short email, 5 years of work had been deleted like pressing a single key. I didn't cry. I didn't get angry. I just felt something hollow spreading through my chest, swallowing every sound in the room. I leaned back in my chair. The faint creak of the seat filled the silence, a sound I had heard every morning while reviewing reports, now suddenly foreign. My eyes wandered over the desk, the chipped ceramic mug I drank coffee from every day, the photo of my team from last year's company trip, the tiny cactus a junior staffer gave me after her promotion. Everything was still here, untouched. Only I had been erased from the picture. Outside, the sun had just climbed over the eastern rooftops of Denver, casting long streaks of light across the empty desks. I had arrived early, ready to catch up on work after my short leave. I didn't expect my first message of the day to be a dismissal instead of a condolence. I scrolled back to the reason cited: failure to demonstrate sufficient work prioritization during the critical operational phase. A critical phase. They meant the week my father died, the week I stood beside his casket, holding back tears to deliver the eulogy. A quiet laugh escaped me, sharp and empty. To them, family was an inconvenience, but a shipment report was sacred. I pulled out my phone and took a screenshot of the email. I wasn't sure why, but instinct told me to keep it. Then I forwarded it to my personal account. I stood up, opened in my drawer, and took out an old cardboard box. One by one, I packed my things: the plant, the photo, a notepad, and a few pens. I did it slowly, deliberately, like performing a farewell ritual. The elevator doors slid open. Heels clicked against the tile, followed by a few quiet laughs. People were arriving, I heard Tanya's voice from accounting. "Grace, you're here early. It's only 6:30. I turned and smiled faintly. "Not early, Tanya. It's my last day here." She froze. "What? Who said that?" I showed her my phone. Her eyes widened, then darkened. "That's insane. You were on approved leave." I nodded. So I thought. After a pause, she whispered, "Did Richard say anything?" "I haven't seen him yet, but I'm about to." Carrying the box, I walked down the hall to Richard's office. The door was closed, lights on. I knocked lightly. "Come in." He looked up from his laptop, face expressionless, eyes showing only mild irritation at being interrupted. "Grace, I was just about to call you. I got your email," I said, setting the box on his desk. "Nicely written." "This isn't personal," he replied in his even corporate tone. "The company needs people who can adapt to change. I know you've been through a tough time, but—" I cut him off. "But you think I can't prioritize work because I buried my father?" He adjusted his tie. "Grace, I understand your emotions, but business doesn't wait. We're at a critical juncture. I can't afford disruptions just because—" I interrupted again, my voice low. "Because of a funeral? That's what you were going to say, wasn't it?" Silence fell. The reflection of the overhead light gleamed on the glass desk like a blade. After a long pause, I said quietly, "I'm not here to argue. I don't need your sympathy. But remember this moment, Richard. Someday, you'll think back to it. He stared at me, uneasy now, but said nothing. I lifted the box, turned, and walked out. As I moved down the hallway, I could feel the eyes following me, some shocked, some sympathetic, some resigned. No one spoke. They didn't have to. Everyone who's ever worked long enough knows, one day, everything you've built can vanish with a single email. Outside the Horizon Freight Building, the morning sun was in full bloom. The rumble of trucks echoed faintly in the distance, steady and strong. I took a deep breath, tasting the dry Denver air, and smiled, not out of joy, but clarity. I finally understood that my loyalty had value only until it was no longer useful. I glanced down at my phone. The screenshot glowed on the screen, just a few cold lines and a signature, Richard Cole. I locked it and slipped it back into my bag. All right, I whispered. Let's see who remembers this moment first. I never went back to Horizon Freight again. The next morning, I got a message from Sarah, a former coworker who had worked beside me for 4 years. Grace, I heard you got fired for skipping work without notice. They said you didn't inform your manager. I stared at the screen, my chest tightening. Skipping work without notice? I opened my old email thread, the approved leave request, the message from Richard granting it. Everything was still there. I typed back, I had written approval from him. But thank you for letting me know, Sarah. Before noon, 3 more messages came in. One person asked if I was suing the company, and another said Richard told people I had left my team in chaos before taking off. Rumors spread faster than I could breathe. I sat on my couch, watching each line appear and disappear on my phone, every one of them stinging like a pinprick. That afternoon, I went out for coffee. The shop was near the Horizon Building, a place I used to stop by almost every day. From a distance, I saw 2 former coworkers chatting on the sidewalk. One of them saw me and quickly turned away. I didn't blame them. In the workplace, silence is often how people protect themselves. That night, Karen called me. She worked in accounting, quiet but perceptive. Her voice was low and cautious. Grace, I'm not sure if I should say this, but you deserve to know. Yesterday, I overheard Richard talking to someone from the executive board. They mentioned needing a legitimate reason for his decision. It sounded like something was being covered up. I went still. Covered up what? I'm not sure, she said. But I heard him say, she's not a problem, but she could become one. It was strange. You should be careful. After the call, I sat motionless. Those words kept echoing in my head. Not a problem, but could become one. What problem? I wasn't the kind of person who stirred trouble. I followed every rule, stayed out of politics, so why me? 2 days later, another email arrived from HR. Please confirm you have received full compensation and have no further claims against the company. I read it several times, then saved a copy. There was something uneasy about how quickly they wanted to close everything. That night, I got a message from an unknown number. Be careful with what you're keeping. Not everyone wants the past dug up. No name, just a string of digits. I froze. I hadn't told anyone that I'd asked Eli to recover the data. There was only one explanation. Someone inside the system had found out. The next morning, I decided to return to the office to pick up a few things I'd left behind. The air inside was the same as always, a blend of coffee and freshly printed paper. When I walked in, the looks I got weren't the same. Some avoided eye contact, others gave me hesitant nods. I smiled, trying to stay calm. In the hallway, I saw Richard talking to a younger employee. When he noticed me, he stopped. His tone was rehearsed, every word perfectly staged. Grace, I thought you'd completed your exit process. I'm just here to collect a few personal items, I said, keeping my eyes on him. And to thank you for that thoughtful email. He raised an eyebrow, smirking faintly. No need for sarcasm. I know this isn't easy for you, but sometimes even the best people don't fit the change. Change? I repeated. You call firing someone who was burying her father a change? Richard shrugged, voice calm, like he was commenting on the weather. Grace, this company can't stop for one person. You know that better than anyone. I looked at him for a long moment. He didn't blink, just straightened his jacket and walked away. As I left the office, I heard someone whisper behind me. They said she was disciplined internally. I didn't turn back. I just walked faster. Outside, the Denver sun lay thin across the streets. I stopped on the sidewalk and took a deep breath. I had lost my job, my reputation was being smeared, and now someone was watching me. But in the middle of that chaos, one truth began to surface. I wasn't the real reason Richard had fired me. There was something else, something bigger, dirtier, that he didn't want me to uncover. That night, I opened my laptop and looked at the folder Eli had sent me. The subject line of one internal email glowed on the screen. Quarterly report adjustment. I didn't open it, not yet. But I knew one thing for certain. The truth was in those files. And soon I was going to find it. That night, a soft rain fell over Denver. The sound of raindrops on the balcony mixed with the faint hum of passing cars. I sat by the window, my laptop open, but the screen black, reflecting the tired face of someone I barely recognized. 3 weeks had passed since my father's death, yet the emptiness in my chest hadn't eased. The small apartment that once felt warm now seemed unnaturally quiet. A photo of my father sat on the shelf, his gentle smile and familiar crow's feet frozen in time. I could still picture that last morning before he went into the hospital. He was sitting on the back porch, holding a cup of coffee, looking out at the garden where he used to teach me how to fish when I was little. "Don't fight everything, Grace," he said. "The river always flows, but the rocks stay still. You don't have to swim upstream, just stand firm." Back then, I didn't fully understand him. I only nodded, thinking it was one of his simple bits of wisdom. But now, in the silence of this room, I could hear every word clearly. The laptop screen lit up when I touched the keyboard. I opened the folder Eli had sent me, the recovered data files, hundreds of lines long, each one containing dozens of internal emails. My eyes stopped at a few familiar names: Richard Cole, regional board members, and the head accountant. I didn't open them. I didn't want to act out of anger. Some battles can't be won through impulse. I sent Eli a message. "Are you sure no one found out about the data recovery?" His reply came almost instantly. "I wiped every trace of access. But Grace, be careful. The system logs everything. If they start checking, they'll notice." I wrote back, "I won't rush. Thank you." I closed the laptop and poured myself a cup of tea. The scent of mint filled the room, pulling me back to the quiet evenings when my father was still alive. I used to complain that he was too calm. No matter what happened, he would just smile and say, "The more you stir the water, the murkier it gets. Stand still, and it clears." Now I finally understood. Maybe calmness is the only way not to drown. The next morning, the sky was clearer. I woke early, brewed coffee, and opened the small wooden box where I kept my father's things: a pocket watch and a small slip of paper with a line he had written for me years ago. "Be steady, not loud." I taped that note to the wall beside my desk, a reminder. The phone rang. It was Eli. "Grace, I heard something at the office," he said. "Richard's looking for someone to blame for last month's data leak. They think someone accessed the financial system without clearance." I went silent. "Who are they blaming?" "I think it's me," Eli sighed. "But don't worry. I'll tell them I was running a routine security check. You don't have to cover for me." "I want to," he said firmly. "You know I've never liked the way Richard runs things." His voice dropped lower. "Just promise me one thing. If things go bad, don't give up." After the call, I stared at the note on the wall. "Be steady, not loud." Yes, I thought. I won't make noise. I'll stand firm. That afternoon, I drove through my father's old neighborhood. The narrow road led into a quiet suburb lined with maple trees just starting to turn color. I stopped at the wooden bridge that crossed the small creek, the same place where he once taught me to wait patiently for a fish to bite. I stood there for a long time, listening to the sound of water. The river hadn't changed. Only the person standing by it had. "I'll do as you said," I whispered. "I won't fight the current. I'll wait." That evening, I opened my laptop again and clicked on one of the recovered emails for the first time. The subject line read, "Quarterly Revenue Adjustment Q2. Sender, Richard Cole." The message was brief, but enough to send a chill down my spine. In it, Richard instructed the chief accountant to temporarily adjust the profit figures to align with shareholder expectations. The phrase sounded harmless, but I knew what it really meant: a polished way to falsify financial reports. I read a few more emails. Each carried the same tone, vague enough to avoid direct blame, clear enough to expose intent. I closed the laptop and leaned back in my chair. The anger was there, but it was quieter now, colder. Everything around me seemed still, as if the air itself was holding its breath. I finally understood why he had to get rid of me. I had overseen part of that reporting process. If I'd stayed, I would have uncovered it sooner or later. My leave of absence had simply been the perfect excuse. I couldn't sleep that night. I sat in the dim glow of the lamp, listening to the wind whistle through the window. Outside, the river still flowed, steady and relentless. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something new. Not grief, not fear, but purpose. The battle hadn't begun yet, but I knew one thing for certain: I wouldn't stay silent forever. And when the moment came, I would follow my father's words. I wouldn't fight the current. I'd let it carry away everything that didn't deserve to remain. 3 days later, I returned to the city earlier than usual. The sun had just begun to rise, casting a soft golden hue over the tall buildings along Blake Avenue. I stopped by the small cafe on the corner, the one where Eli and I used to meet for quick work discussions back when we were still at Horizon. He was already there, sitting with his old laptop open, looking exhausted. "I found what you needed," Eli said as soon as I sat down. His voice was low and fast, like he was afraid someone might overhear. "But Grace, this is serious." He turned the laptop toward me. On the screen were dozens of internal company files, emails, meeting minutes, and financial adjustment reports. Richard's name appeared everywhere, leaving short notes that all hinted at the same thing: inflated profits to meet quarterly targets. I read through each line carefully, my heartbeat quickening. How long has he been doing this? Eli sighed. At least 3 quarters. Remember when our Western region revenue suddenly jumped 18%? Those numbers were adjusted before being sent to headquarters. I leaned back in my chair. Every piece was falling into place. Richard hadn't fired me because of my leave. He'd fired me because I was in the wrong place at the wrong time, the one person who could prove the numbers were fake. "I backed up everything onto this drive," Eli said, pulling a small silver hard drive from his jacket pocket. "But you have to be careful. Richard's already asked the cybersecurity team to investigate unauthorized logins. I took the drive and slipped it into my bag. I understand. I won't let you get caught up in this." Eli smiled faintly, though his eyes were tired. "I owed you one, remember? When you defended me after that system crash last year. This is me returning the favor." We sat in silence for a few moments. Outside, the city was waking up. The hum of trucks and car horns filled the air. When I stood to leave, Eli spoke again, his voice lower. "If you're going to act, do it soon. I can tell Richard's getting nervous. He's not the type to sit still when he feels threatened." That afternoon, I went home, locked the door, and opened my personal computer. I plugged in the drive and watched the folders appear on the screen. Each one was neatly labeled with dates, senders, and recipients. I opened one email at random. Richard Cole, temporary authorization to adjust projected Q2 figures pending final results. Below it was a reply from the chief accountant. "Richard, this adjustment doesn't align with the original budget plan. I need confirmation." And then Richard's short response: "Just do it. I'll take responsibility." I read that last line over and over: "I'll take responsibility." Maybe he never imagined that one day he'd actually have to. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Richard's cold face from that day in his office. Heard his voice again: "This company can't stop for one person." The words echoed in my mind, blending with the wind outside the window. The next morning, a message from Eli appeared on my phone. I got called into the security office. They asked about last week's access logs. I told them it was a routine audit. "They don't suspect anything yet, but you should be careful," I replied briefly. "Thank you. Don't contact me for now. Silence is safest." I spent the entire morning organizing the files into groups, noting timelines, and tracing each thread of communication. Every email, every phrase, was a piece of the same picture: a coordinated fraud hidden behind harmless corporate language. I made a second backup and locked it inside a small safe in the corner of my apartment. That afternoon, as I was preparing dinner, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find a man in a dark suit introducing himself as internal security from Horizon Freight. His voice was polite, but his eyes were sharp. "We're reviewing data access records. There's information suggesting you may still have company materials." I stayed calm. "I only have copies of my personal emails, all legally sent from my company account before it was closed." He nodded, jotted something down, and left. When the door shut behind him, I leaned against the wall, feeling my pulse race. Richard was starting to get suspicious. That night, I called Eli. "We need to stop," I said. "I don't want you getting hurt." "Don't worry," he replied. "I know how to protect myself. You're the one they're watching now. But Grace, if something happens, remember, you have proof, and you have the right to tell the truth." After the call, I stepped out onto the balcony, looking down at the glowing street below. The traffic moved steadily, like water flowing around rocks. I thought of my father's words: "Be steady, not loud. Stand firm. Don't make noise." I knew it was time to prepare for the next step. I couldn't just keep this data locked away forever, but I also knew that if I moved too soon, everything would collapse and I'd go down with it. I looked up at the dark sky and whispered, "No one can hide forever. The river may seem calm, but it always finds its way to the sea." From that moment, I understood the real fight had begun, and this time I wasn't the one being cornered anymore. 3 weeks had passed since the man in the dark suit knocked on my door. I had stayed silent, telling no one what I knew. But silence has a way of echoing loudly. Horizon Freight was starting to unravel. Internal memos leaked online, clients complained about delayed contracts, and several of Richard's closest allies were suddenly reassigned. I read the news quietly, feeling neither joy nor vengeance, only certainty. The tide was rising, and Richard was no longer steady on the chair he once sat so confidently. One Monday morning, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. The voice on the other end was calm, low, and composed. "I'm Catherine Wu, CEO of Atlas Logistics. I hope you have a few minutes to talk." The name stopped me cold. Atlas was Horizon's biggest rival, and a company I'd always respected for how fairly they treated their people. I said, "Yes, I can talk." Catherine didn't waste words. "I heard about your departure from Horizon. People in the industry say it wasn't fair. I've reviewed your record, and I'd like you to come to our office tomorrow. Not an interview, just a conversation between two women who understand how this world works." The next day, I arrived at Atlas. The building was bright and open, the air lighter than any I'd breathed at Horizon. Catherine's office sat on the top floor, its glass wall framing the distant Rocky Mountains. She rose to greet me, her smile calm, her gaze sharp enough to read what I wasn't saying. "I was once in your position," she began after offering me a seat. "20 years ago, I was forced out of the company I helped build because I refused to stay silent about fraud. They called it restructuring. You see, sometimes the prettiest words hide the ugliest actions. I didn't speak, but I felt the weight of her truth." Catherine continued, "I know you discovered something at Horizon. I don't need details. What I do need is someone like you. We're expanding our Western operations. I'm looking for someone experienced, principled, and unafraid. I want you to join us as Regional Executive Director." I stayed quiet for a long time. Part of me wanted to say yes immediately. Another part stayed cautious. "Aren't you worried Horizon will try to retaliate?" Catherine smiled slightly. "They might, but I'm not afraid. People can only threaten you while you're silent. The moment you speak the truth, they lose their only weapon." She slid a folder across the table. "This contract comes with one condition. I want you to rebuild your team from the ground up. I'm not hiring you because you were wronged. I'm hiring you because you can do what they never could: lead with respect." I looked down at the contract, then back at her. "You realize I still have a 6-month non-compete clause?" We've reviewed it," Catherine said, her tone firm but even. "It's vague, overly broad, and nearly unenforceable in a wrongful termination case. Our legal team will protect you. If they want to sue, they'll have to explain why they fired someone during her father's funeral." I couldn't help it. I laughed, for the first time in weeks. "You think they'll just let it go?" No, Catherine said, her voice steady. I think they'll react, but I also believe justice has its own timing. Our conversation lasted nearly an hour. When I stood to leave, Catherine said, Grace, don't let small minds define your worth. There are battles you don't need to win. Just walk away with your dignity intact. The rest of time will be handled. That night, I sat at my desk, the Atlas contract neatly placed before me. I thought of my father. He once told me, You don't need to swim against the current, just find the ground that holds you steady. Maybe this was that ground, the place where I could stand, rebuild, and offer others the fairness we'd been denied. Before signing, I picked up my phone and sent a message to someone. Jason, do you have a minute to talk? I might have good news. Jason had been my operations lead at Horizon. Honest, loyal, and steady. His reply came quickly. If it means you're coming back, the whole team's ready. I smiled at the screen. No, I'm not going back. But maybe I'll build something where people like us can start again, without bowing to power. The next morning, I called Catherine. I accept, I said. But I have one condition. What's that? I want to choose my team. And if any of them used to work at Horizon, I want them to be considered fairly, no bias. Catherine laughed softly. If they're as capable as you, I'll be the one thanking you for bringing them. When I signed the contract, my hand trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of knowing I was stepping into a new chapter. I wasn't the woman who got fired anymore. I was the woman rebuilding her own road. I closed the folder and looked out the window. Morning light spilled across the city. For the first time in months, I felt calm. I didn't know how Richard would react when he heard the news, but I knew one thing for sure: he would hear it. And when he did, I wanted him to understand. Some people you think have fallen are only preparing to stand taller than ever before. News of my joining Atlas didn't take long to spread. The logistics world in Denver wasn't that big. One phone call, a few forwarded emails, and word would reach exactly where it needed to. I knew Richard would react. I just didn't expect him to move that fast. 2 weeks after I signed my contract, a letter arrived from Horizon Freight's legal department. The tone was dry and cold. Grace Miller has violated the non-compete clause of her employment contract signed March 12, 2018. You are hereby required to terminate your employment with Atlas Logistics immediately or face legal action. I read the letter 3 times, then set it on the desk and laughed quietly. In this world, people lose their morals but cling to contract clauses as if they were sacred scripture. I forwarded the letter to Atlas's legal team. Catherine's response came within the hour. Don't worry, Grace. They have no case. Keep working. We'll handle the rest. But that was only the beginning. 3 days later, a post appeared on a transport industry forum. Title: Former Horizon Manager Suspected of Stealing Client Data. Beneath it, a short, anonymous paragraph claimed that I had left suddenly, taking internal files with me. It didn't name me directly, but anyone in the field knew exactly who it was referring to. That night, I sat in my Atlas office, the streets below thinning out for the evening. Catherine walked in and set 2 cups of coffee on the table. I assume you've read it. I have, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Don't let it rattle you, she said. People like him only make noise to hide their fear. I looked out through the window. Noise can still plant doubt, I said. I don't want this hurting Atlas. Catherine sat across from me, her gaze softening. Grace, people like you are why I built this company, to prove integrity still has a place in this industry. If Horizon wants to take us to court, they'll have to explain why they fired a woman who was burying her father. I stayed silent for a while before asking, what if they keep attacking? Then we answer with the truth, she said. No retaliation, just light. In the following weeks, I threw myself completely into rebuilding Atlas's Western operations. I worked late nights, almost forgetting the noise swirling outside, but one morning, a message from Jason lit up my phone. The first person from my old team I'd reached out to. Grace, have you read Richard's interview? I opened the link. It was a glossy business magazine piece filled with his usual spin. Sometimes in business, you have to make hard decisions, he said. Not everyone is strong enough to understand priorities. Below that, he hinted that I couldn't handle pressure, that some employees carried too much emotional weight into their work. I read to the end without anger, only pity. People talk about integrity only after they've lost it. That afternoon, Catherine stopped by my desk. He's trying to steer the narrative, she said. But this isn't his game anymore. What do you mean? I asked. Someone sent me internal data from Horizon, she said, placing a sealed envelope in front of me. A journalist friend is investigating financial fraud across regional logistics firms. Richard's name came up more than once. I opened the envelope. My pulse quickened as I recognized the spreadsheets, the same type of documents I had been keeping locked away. Are you planning to release these? Not yet, she said. When you're ready. But Grace, it's time you decide how you want this story to end. You can stay silent and let time bury it, or you can step forward and let the light do its work. That night, I sat alone in my apartment. Outside, Denver's skyline shimmered in the dark, lights glowing on the distant glass towers. I opened the safe, pulled out the hard drive, and plugged it in. Every file was still there, clear and damning. I thought of my father's words. Don't fight the river, just stand firm. I whispered, I've stood firm, Dad. But now the river needs to see what happens when it turns murky. I opened a new email draft, typed the recipient's name, Megan Price, investigative journalist, Denver Tribune. Subject, information on financial fraud at Horizon Freight. I stared at the words for a long time, then clicked Save Draft. Not tonight, not yet, but soon. When the time came, I wouldn't need to shout or seek revenge. I would only need to tell the truth. The next day at Atlas, Jason submitted his application, along with several others from my old team. Catherine met them all, smiling warmly. If everything goes well, she said, we'll have an entirely new department. When they left, I turned to Catherine. What should I do with the data? She looked at me, eyes steady and kind. Do what would make your father proud. That night, back home, I reopened the draft. I reread every word, then added one final line. I'm not seeking revenge. I just want justice to be seen. I took a deep breath and pressed send. When the message sent notification appeared, I felt something unexpected, not fear, not relief, but a quiet peace. I knew the real fight had just begun. But this time, I wasn't alone. 3 days after I sent the email to Megan Price, the sky over Denver turned a heavy gray. I went to work as usual, keeping my routine calm and quiet. But deep down, I knew the surface was about to break. That morning, while I was in a meeting with the operations team, my phone started buzzing nonstop. 3 messages, then 5, then 8. Each one carried the same subject line: Denver Tribune, Horizon Freight accused of financial fraud. I opened the article. The first photo showed Horizon's glass tower. The headline printed in bold: Leaked internal reports reveal Horizon Freight. Leadership manipulated financial data for 3 consecutive quarters. Below it were the details: emails, spreadsheets, reports, every one of them identical to the files Eli and I had found. Author, Megan Price. I read every line, slowly feeling both distant and present, as if the story belonged to someone else. Megan didn't mention my name. She only wrote, a verified internal source provided evidence that the data adjustments were directed from senior management. The room was silent. Jason looked up from across the table. Grace, did you know about this? I nodded once. Let's finish the meeting. Everything will make sense soon enough. But I knew nothing would stay quiet after this. By noon, every major outlet had picked it up. Reuters, Business Weekly, even local Denver news. Horizon's stock dropped 18% in a matter of hours. My old coworkers started messaging me. The office is chaos. Richard lost his temper in the meeting. They just called an emergency session with all senior staff. I sat in my Atlas office, watching the rain streak the windows. I felt neither triumph nor regret, only a deep stillness, the kind that comes when a storm you've seen coming finally arrives. That afternoon, my phone rang. I didn't need to check the number to know who it was. Grace, Richard's voice rasped, breath uneven. What did you do? I don't know what you're talking about, I said evenly. Don't play dumb. Only you had access to those files. You think you can take me down? You'll be sued, You're right, I interrupted. I was the only one with access. which also means I'm the only one who knows exactly what you did with it. Silence. Then, in a lower tone, he said, "You don't know who you're dealing with, Grace." "No," I replied. "I just finally made sure the light could reach where you're standing." I hung up. My hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but release. For the first time in months, I felt level with him. The next day, the FBI got involved. News outlets reported. Federal investigators reviewing Horizon Freight's financial records. Their headquarters were sealed off for inspection. Several mid-level managers were detained for questioning. Eli texted me. "They came into IT this morning. I spoke with the agents. They know I'm not involved. I told them I was following an audit request. Didn't mention who ordered it." Replied. "Thank you, Eli. Rest. It's almost over." That afternoon, as I packed my things to leave, Catherine walked into my office holding a freshly printed newspaper. "You've seen this?" she asked, laying it on my desk. The headline stretched across half the page. "Horizon Freight Regional Director under investigation for fraud. Shares hit record low." Richard's face filled the cover, pale, sleepless, cornered by reporters holding microphones. The caption read, "Richard Cole, who authorized data adjustments, declines to comment." I stared at the photo for a long time, not out of satisfaction, but because it confirmed what I had always believed. Justice may come late, but it never fails to arrive. Catherine's voice was soft but certain. "I suppose he's realized the woman who couldn't handle pressure is the same one who just cost him everything." I smiled faintly. "You know the funny thing? I never wanted to destroy him. I just wanted my name back. And you did more than that," she said. "You gave others their courage back too." 3 days later, Horizon held a press conference. Richard didn't appear. The interim director spoke instead. "We are cooperating fully with federal investigators. Any individual found guilty of misconduct will be held accountable." That night, I received a message from Paula, Horizon's former head of HR. "Richard's suspended. The FBI took his laptop. They're preparing charges. I don't know how you did it, Grace, but thank you." I set the phone down. A soft breeze slipped through the window, moving the curtains. I thought of my father. If he were here, he'd probably smile and say the river finally carried away the stones that didn't belong. Later that night, I stepped onto the balcony. Denver glowed under amber lights. Far in the distance, Horizon's tower stood quiet, its glass reflecting the dim light of the street below. I thought about that morning when it all began, the email that ended 5 years of work. It all felt like another lifetime now. My phone buzzed again. A new message from Megan Price. "Grace, my next article is about people who stood their ground. I'd like to quote your line from the email. 'I'm not seeking revenge. I just want justice to be seen.' May I?" I smiled and typed back, "You can, and tell them justice doesn't need noise." I stood there for a long time, listening to the wind move through the city. I didn't need applause or recognition. All I needed was the quiet peace of looking in the mirror and not feeling ashamed. Within days, Richard Cole vanished from the industry. Horizon fell into turmoil, shareholders demanding a full restructure. But none of that mattered to me anymore. I had done my part. When I turned off the light and got ready for bed, one thought stayed with me. Maybe, after all this time, the river had finally found its way. And I, just as my father once said, was still standing firm in the middle of it. 2 months later, autumn had settled over Denver. The maples along the streets burned red, and the first chill of the season drifted through the city. Life had found its rhythm again, though it didn't look the same as before. At Atlas, the new team I'd built was running smoothly. The transport projects were on schedule, productivity was up, and more importantly, people were smiling again. Jason sat by his desk, studying a performance chart. "Grace, I've never seen a team work this well. Back at Horizon, every meeting felt like a battlefield. Here, people actually want to work." I smiled. "When people are respected, they want to do their best. You don't have to push them, you just have to lead." His words brought Catherine to mind. She had said something similar on my first day at Atlas. Now I finally understood what she meant. There's no magic in leadership, only the way you treat people. News about Horizon still appeared occasionally, but less often now. They were in the middle of being acquired by a larger transport conglomerate. Richard Cole hadn't gone to trial yet, but according to Paula, he'd officially been indicted. I didn't feel triumphant, just relieved. Not because he was punished, but because the truth was no longer buried. One morning, Catherine called me into her office. She stood by the window, looking down at the busy parking lot below. "Grace," she said, "do you know why I chose you?" "Because I spoke up," I replied. She smiled. "No, because you knew when to stay silent and when to speak. Most people either stay quiet forever or speak too soon. You waited until your words carried weight. That's what makes a true leader." All I could say was, "Thank you." Catherine continued, "I want you to take on a new role, Director of Operations for the entire Northwest region. I know you've never chased power, but sometimes to protect what's right, you need a louder voice." I froze for a moment. The position meant overseeing hundreds of employees and dozens of branches, but more than that, it meant trust. "Catherine," I said softly, "I used to be afraid I wasn't strong enough to start over, but now I think I'm ready." She nodded, her smile warm. "I knew you'd say that." That afternoon, I stopped by the small cafe on the corner. I opened my laptop, checked my inbox, and saw a new email from an unfamiliar name: Barbara Kent, former HR department, Horizon Freight. "Dear Grace, you may not remember me, but I handled your exit paperwork. I recently left Horizon after the restructuring. Before I did, I found something on Richard's old desk. It might belong to you. I'm sending it back. Sincerely, Barbara." Attached was a photo, a small cactus in a chipped ceramic pot, the same one I'd once kept on my desk at Horizon, a gift from my old team. My chest tightened. I read the email again and again, feeling something between nostalgia and peace. A few days later, the package arrived. The cactus was still alive, green and steady. Placed it by the window in my Atlas office, where sunlight touched it every morning. I brushed the dry soil gently and smiled. Maybe it and I weren't so different. Once discarded, but still standing. Still growing where the light could reach us again. That evening, when the office had emptied out, I turned on the local news. A small headline scrolled across the screen: Horizon Freight officially acquired by Meridian Transport. Former executives are banned from working in logistics for 5 years. I watched the words for a long time. There was no sense of victory, only closure. The story had ended, not in vengeance, but in justice. Later, Jason stopped by with 2 cups of coffee. "Grace, I know you're still following the old news." I smiled, maybe just out of habit. He set the cups down, his voice warm. "You know, if you hadn't stood up when you did, the rest of us might still be there, stuck, thinking nothing could ever change." I looked at him and said quietly, "Change always has a price, but sometimes it's the only one worth paying." That night, I drove home late. The wind carried the scent of damp earth. I pulled over by the bridge where my father had once taught me to fish. The river still flowed, gentle and steady, like a heartbeat. I stood there for a long time, feeling as though he were beside me, smiling. "I did it, Dad," I whispered. Not through anger, but by staying still in the current. Back in the car, I turned on the radio. The news anchor was saying, Atlas Logistics reports a third quarter growth of 30% in the Western region. I smiled, not for the numbers, but for what they meant. Proof that you can succeed without stepping on anyone. As I turned down the small road toward home, I glanced back. The river shimmered under the moonlight, and for a brief moment, I saw my father's outline, lean, calm, holding his fishing rod, smiling at the water. Then I understood. Some battles don't need to be won, they just need to be endured, and some scars only teach their meaning after you've healed. I drove on, my heart light as the autumn breeze, leaving behind all the noise that once surrounded me. Tomorrow I will begin my new role, but tonight I wanted just one thing: to smile at the person who had stayed steady in the river and never let herself drift away. 1 year later, winter came early to Denver. Snow blanketed the rooftops. Rows of parked cars sat quietly under a thin layer of frost, and pale gray skies reflected the dim light of a cold morning. I sat in my new office at Atlas, the regional executive director for the Northwest, looking out the wide window at the quiet city below. I was no longer the Grace Miller who had once been dismissed by a cold email. Now, I was leading nearly 200 people across the western states, people who believed in justice and integrity as deeply as I once believed in my father. Outside, the team was setting up for the year-end review. Jason, now head of Western operations, was checking slides with his calm focus. Veronica, who had cried the day I left Horizon, stood by the presentation board, confident and radiant. I looked at them and felt proud. They hadn't just followed me, they had chosen to rebuild, piece by piece, from the ashes of a place that had once broken us. The meeting began. Numbers filled the screen. Revenue up 35%, operational efficiency at a record high. Catherine sat in the front row, her eyes bright, her smile small but full of meaning. When I finished my report, the room rose to its feet. There were no cheers, just long, steady applause, a sound that filled the space with warmth. After the meeting, Catherine came to me. "I told you once, Grace," she said softly, "the ones who can stand firm in the river will someday guide its flow." I smiled. I only did what my father taught me, to stay still when the current rushes by. Maybe that's what real strength is. She shook her head gently. No, Grace. Real strength is teaching others how to stand still with you. That afternoon, I returned to my office to sort through a few documents. In the drawer sat the small cactus Barbara had sent me the year before. It was still alive, greener now, with a new round branch sprouting from its side. I brushed my fingers across the soft spines, a wave of quiet emotion rising inside me. The office phone rang. I picked it up. The voice on the other end made me pause. It was Paula, Horizon's former head of HR. "Grace," she said, her tone warm but a little uncertain. "I don't know if you have a moment. I just wanted to tell you I left Horizon. I'm now a corporate culture consultant for Meridian Transport, the company that acquired them. I thought you might want to know." "Thank you, Paula. I've heard Meridian's been making big changes. They are," she said, "rebuilding from the ground up. And there's something you'll find interesting. Their annual culture report includes a quote from your Denver Tribune interview. Your words became their internal motto. I'm not seeking revenge. I just want justice to be seen." I went silent for a moment, my throat tightening. Paula added, "You've done more than you think, Grace. Your story made a lot of people in this industry look at how they treat their teams. I just wanted to say thank you for not staying silent." After we hung up, I looked out the window. Snow had started to fall harder, white flakes landing softly on the glass before melting away. In the distance, the Denver River wound through the city, glinting faintly as it moved past the still stones along its banks. I could almost hear my father's voice echoing in my mind. "The river will find its way, Grace. You just have to be the stone." That night, I left the office late. Outside, snow covered the streets, headlights stretching into streaks of gold through the flurries. I drove across the old wooden bridge where my father and I used to fish when I was little. I parked, stepped out, and walked to the railing. The air was sharp and cold, my breath rising like smoke. Below, the water moved slowly under the ice. I thought about everything: the morning I was fired, the sleepless nights searching for proof, the fear, and the moment I decided to send that email to Megan Price. It all felt distant now, yet vivid, as if time had folded back on itself. Without those days, I wouldn't have understood the true meaning of standing firm. I picked up a small stone from the bridge and tossed it into the river. It hit the surface, sending out quiet ripples before sinking beneath. I whispered, "Dad, I'm still here, and I'm still standing." When I got back to the car, my phone lit up with a notification. A new headline had just been published. Atlas Logistics named Most Humane Workplace of 2025. Below it was a quote from my acceptance speech. "A company isn't defined by the money it makes, but by how it treats the people who help create that value." I smiled and sat behind the wheel. In that moment, I felt something close. Not revenge, not triumph, but peace. The kind that comes when justice, kindness, and integrity finally meet. As I drove off the bridge, I looked back one last time. The river shimmered beneath the streetlights, carrying melted snow toward the sea. It was still moving, still alive, just like life itself, always flowing, always changing, but those who know how to stand still within it will never be swept away. And I understood then, my father had been right all along. True strength isn't about defeating others. It's about staying whole when the world around you shifts. I pressed the accelerator and left the bridge behind. Ahead, the night sky opened wide, filled with gentle light, like a new beginning, quiet and calm. My story had come full circle. But the journey of learning to stand steady in the current, I knew, would never end.